Hey you guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria Evans. I'm a science-based intuitive eating specialist helping you stop food fear, food guilt, and self-sabotage so you can eat effortlessly and feel amazing. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to stop comparing your body. I know this is something I used to really struggle with in my own recovery. And, just based on the world we live in today, there's so much comparison, the compare and despair. And I'm going to give you some tips and some strategies for how to work through that so that you can feel confident and amazing in your own skin. Before we get into it, I did want to ask you to please subscribe. It really does mean the world to me to know that you're there supporting. It just takes 1 second to hit that little button. I'm releasing videos every single week so you won't miss a thing. I also would like to ask you if you want me to make a certain type of video about a certain topic, please comment that below. I'll make a video in response to that. And if you want even more custom support, that one-on-one support, I invite you to book a consult call in the description box below for my 90 Days to Food Freedom one-on-one coaching program. All right, with that said, let's get into it. So the first thing you have to talk about is, why do we compare? Why do we do this? And it helps to know this in order to kind of break through that compare and despair in order to feel confident in ourselves. So the first thing we have to look at is oxytocin. So oxytocin is a neurotransmitter for bonding and connection and love. People often talk about it a lot when it comes to childbirth. But for the purpose of today, we want to look at it when it comes to your desire to want to be in a group, to fit into a group. So the thing about oxytocin is that we actually required it, especially thousands of years ago, in order to fit into our tribe. Essentially, if we were not fitting into the group around us, if we were not assimilating, if we were being too different, that would be problematic. We wanted to fit in. We wanted to be like everyone else. We wanted to follow the status quo because that is how we would have survived all those years ago. If we were too different, if we were acting different, if we were being weird and all those types of things, right? We might have been kicked out of that tribe, might have been kicked out of the community, and therefore we wouldn't have survived, right? If we were living in the jungle thousands of years ago and we have our group and we are all protecting each other and are able to forage for food and all that, if someone is kicked out of that group, their chances for survival are greatly diminished, which means we have the genes carried forward to today of the humans, of our relatives, of our past, right? That basically were able to assimilate and fit into the group to survive. And oxytocin was flowing, that bonding, that connection to be a part of a group. So that is why when it comes to things like oxytocin as well as shame, right? That shame is that fear of disconnection, fear of not being a part of a group. That is why that shame is so prevalent when it comes to comparison. We judge ourselves and tell ourselves, oh, if I were to look this way and look like that, then I'd fit into this group, right? We'd be more lovable, we'd be more valuable. The reality is our brain has been designed to think that way as a strategy to help you want to fit into your society, to your community, whether that be in our current social media community, right? Because our brain is not evolved to understand it's the 21st century. So it's just simply looking at the world we live in, assuming that is our big giant tribe, and comparing ourselves to other people and asking itself, how can I fit into the tribe that I'm currently in to make sure that I'm not kicked out, which would greatly diminish my chances of survival. This is also why when often we're spiraling about body image, it kind of ends in, and then I die alone. Because that's quite literally how your brain has been, designed to think that if I don't fit into this group, then I will essentially die alone. So fit in and assimilate. So the first thing when it comes to oxytocin and that desire to fit in, to feel, you don't want to feel that shame and not this connection and feeling different, is understanding that this is your brain operating as if it's thousands and thousands of years ago. So that first step is really catching yourself and reminding yourself, okay, the reason that I want to fit in so badly, the reason I want to look like this person so badly is because my brain is telling me if I look like that person, if I was to, assimilate into that look, then I would be safe, then I would be connected, then I'd be loved, then I'd be worthy. And so much of that is tied into survival. So the first step is to really acknowledge, my brain is operating as if it's thousands of years ago, and what my brain is telling me right now is truth, that it's important that I look like this person and comparing myself and all of that. That is simply my body using a survival technique as if it was, a true threat to our survival to not look like that person. So that first step is to truly acknowledge that. The second step is to look at serotonin. If you don't already, maybe have guessed, I really coach from a very scientific way. I believe that education is empowerment and removes shame so you can make long-lasting change. So looking at serotonin, we often think about when it comes to happiness, but we can also think about it as gaining a social advantage, right? And so we tell ourselves if we look a certain way, we will gain a social advantage. We will rise up in the group, right? Which is often why we feel like when we're sad or depressed, we feel like we're the bottom, right? We feel like everyone is better than us, that we don't have anything figured out. So that depletion of serotonin is very much that feeling of I don't have a social advantage in this moment. And again, this comes back to how our brain is working, right? We wanted to understand our place, our hierarchy within that group, within that tribe, to make sure that we stayed safe within that tribe. So we're always looking at each other, sizing everyone up to understand our place within a hierarchy. But again, it comes back to how our brain has been operating for thousands of years, thinking it needed to understand its place, who is the alpha, who is the leader of this tribe, all of that. So we made sure that we weren't stepping on toes, that we weren't being too different, that we might not get kicked out of the group, right? We wanted to make sure we fit in, we assimilated. So all is to say, right, why we're comparing from a more scientific standpoint, right, is because our brain thinks this is what we need to do to survive. We need to remind ourselves, this is the 21st century. This is not thousands of years ago. We're not fitting in and assimilating, right? This is no longer a threat to our survival. Piggybacking off of that, right, we have to look at something called heuristics. Now, heuristics are little shortcuts that your brain loves to make. And essentially, the little shortcut your brain has made by looking at all these magazine covers, by social media, by these people with millions of likes, and whatever those things are that we're seeing in our environment, we see the smiling faces, right? We tell ourselves, oh, that person in that body is happy. And then when we're feeling unhappy, when we are feeling not so good about ourselves, our brain thinks, if I was to look like those people in that magazine or that girl over there in the gym, then I would be happy. Because our brain has been conditioned, right, to have that shortcut, that certain body type equals happiness. Through, again, like all our media, through our social conditioning, especially if you've been socialized as a woman, all those different types of things, right? So our brain is taking that shortcut. But that shortcut is not a reality, right? Having a certain body type does not guarantee us happiness. As someone who has been on every different side of that spectrum when it comes to my body shape and my body size, was struggling with multiple eating disorders, I truly can honestly say that I had never been less confident in my life when I was at my smallest size and everyone was telling me I looked so great. That is because happiness does not come from an external form, right? It's an internal feeling, it's an internal state that we cannot achieve through external achievement. And yet we're telling ourselves that because that is how we've been conditioned through our external environment, through the world that we have been, this capitalist, patriarchal society that tells us if we were to look a certain way, if we were to achieve a certain thing, a certain size, then we'd be happy and worthy and loved and all that. When we also think about this, we also have to think about, like I kind of alluded to there, the patriarchal side of this. Dieting and tricking ourselves and comparing ourselves, how much of that is a way to control you, right? Especially if you've been socialized as a woman. If we are worried about the size of our thigh gap, if we are worried about what other people are thinking about us, what are we not worrying about? We're not worrying about our place in society in terms of our ability to move up and evolve and create positive change in the world. If I'm so consumed with my counting calorie app, and if I got to the gym that day to make sure that I don't gain the arm flab or whatever, right? What am I not worrying about? I'm not worrying about equality. I'm not worrying about, human rights. I'm not, taking a seat at the table and leaning in and going for these positions of power. We can truly make a difference in society. So that's all kind of piggybacking off of one point, but essentially this idea that we would be happier in that other body, our life would be better. All of that is a lie that our brain is telling us based off of what it's seen in our environment in terms of our conditioning, which is false in capitalistic patriarchal society, but also because of how our brain has been wired, again, thousands of years ago in order to survive. So recognizing, creating that awareness and taking that step back to realize, hey, these thoughts are not actually serving me. This oxytocin, serotonin that are pumping through me, thank you, I see you, but I actually don't need to look like that person in order to be safe, in order to thrive and survive. Additionally, happiness does not lie in that smaller size. Now, the second point I want to make about this is that life is about 50% positive and 50% negative emotions. Now, some people can dispute that a little bit here and there, but the reality is we are kind of always on that up and down flow, and that is normal, right? Because we require the contrast of life in order to appreciate it. If it's always sunny, we don't appreciate the sun. So if we're fed this idea that we should be happy all the time, positive vibes only, all that stuff, right? Essentially, then when we're not feeling that way, going back to that heuristic, we think to ourselves, what is the problem? oh, well, if I'm looking at my body and I see everywhere in society that this person lost this much weight and they're smiling in the after photo, this person did a TikTok and they're dancing and their stomach is flat, right? And they look amazing, right? In terms of our societal conditioning, our brain tells us that is the solution. But the reality is there's no end point where you're suddenly going to be happy. There's no body size you're going to achieve. There's no job you're going to get. There's no external thing, like I said, that you're going to get to. And that is going to be the top of the mountain, the finish line, where you're never going to feel sad or anxious or ashamed or all those types of negative emotions that you're trying to escape from because you think having a smaller body type will allow you to achieve that. So if we're fed this idea that we should be happy all the time, positive vibes only, all that stuff, right? Essentially, then when we're not feeling that way, going back to that heuristic, we think to ourselves, what is the problem? Oh, well, if I'm looking at my body and I see everywhere in society that this person lost this much weight and they're smiling in the after photo, this person did a TikTok and they're dancing and their stomach is flat, right? And they look amazing, right? In terms of our societal conditioning, our brain tells us that is the solution. But the reality is there's no end point where you're suddenly going to be happy. There's no body size you're going to achieve. There's no job you're going to get. There's no external thing, like I said, that you're going to get to. And that is going to be the top of the mountain, the finish line, where you're never going to feel sad or anxious or ashamed or all those types of negative emotions that you're trying to escape from because you think having a smaller body type will allow you to achieve that. When you're noticing yourself comparing yourself to someone else, it's because essentially you're thinking that if I looked like that person, then I wouldn't experience these negative emotions. But because you are a human in the human experience, you automatically will. It is a requirement for life. A little story on that. I remember when I was early into my recovery and I was going to the gym and I saw this girl. She was very petite, very small body size. And I remember thinking to myself, oh man, what if I looked like her? And I think I'd be better and happy and whatever. And I remember catching myself and then repeating to myself like a mantra, right? Because sometimes as well, especially when you're early in recovery, you're going to have those old thoughts that are not supporting you, those old body image thoughts that are trying to compare you and not trying to help you. And it's our opportunity and responsibility to catch that and change them, right? Just because you think a thought doesn't mean it needs to be true. Often we think thoughts are true just because we've thought it so many times. And often these thoughts are not even our own, right? They're put onto us by societal conditioning. So you want to remind yourself in those moments when you're finding yourself comparing, right, is reminding yourself, this is a Buddhist monk saying, and that is that all beings suffer, right? All beings suffer. Attaining that certain body type, looking that certain way, having her hair, her skin, her whatever, that does not relieve her from the suffering of being a human in the human experience. So I used to say to myself on repeat, all beings suffer, to remind myself that looking a certain way is not the end-all achievement. And with that, you're worth so much more than a body. You're worth so much more than your external appearance. So stop reducing everyone around you to that, as well as yourself as well. My next point here, number 4, is that comparison robs us of the ability to be happy now by making it conditional on looking like someone else, right? So if I'm telling myself I will only be happy when I look like that person, when I have this certain body type, what does that mean? It means that you're not looking for that happiness now. You're not seeing the positives in your life right now, because you're actively looking for the ways that you are not like this person. If you're looking for what you are not, you will find it, right? Our brain has been primed to that reticular activating system to look for things that are important and relevant information. If I'm telling myself that I can't be happy now because I don't look like this person, then I've primed my brain to only look for situations where I'm not happy. And then I tell myself, oh, it's because I don't look like that person's body type, right? Versus that all beings suffer, right? Reminding ourselves of how our brain works from a survival standpoint, reminding ourselves of the heuristics, right? Telling myself that happiness is not conditional on a body size. I can find happiness in all aspects of my life, right? Priming my brain in a very different way to seek happiness, to seek, love and support and all those types of things outside of a body size. But if we're always priming our brain for the negative, we will find it. So you want to be very conscious and intentional that we are not placing our happiness conditional on a body size, because in doing so, we create a self-fulfilling prophecy where we feel like we have to be happy to have that body type, or to be happy we need that body type because happiness will not come in a body type, or just forever chasing smoke. Now, my 5th point here, before I dig in a little bit into my tips, is that you are often romanticizing a smaller body type. Right? Kind of going back a little bit to my story, I don't have photos of myself purging over a toilet at night. I don't have photos of myself on 30-kilometer runs as a punishment for eating some food. I don't have photos of myself just racked, filled with anxiety, super anxious, hating myself. I don't have photos of myself, standing on the scale and crying because I knew, however, whatever direction that scale went that day was how I was going to feel about myself and kind of my place in the world and my worth and everything, right? So when you're looking at those photos of yourself, whether it be from years ago or whether it be of other people, right, we're romanticizing that smaller body, right? We don't have pictures of them or of ourselves often in the times that we were struggling, whether it be to achieve or maintain that smaller body size, or whether it be in a pursuit of a different body size, right? We only have the photos of them smiling those moments on the cover of magazines, or them happy and smiling on TikToks or whatever. Similarly, we only have those photos of ourselves if we're comparing ourselves to a past self, a younger self, right? We don't have the photos, especially if at that time we were struggling with disordered eating or an eating disorder. We don't have the photos of the struggles that we were experiencing during that time. So we have this snapshot that is giving us this distorted sample size of what our life actually was like. All that to say, I want you to acknowledge that a lot of the time we're romanticizing a smaller body because we don't have the view of what every other aspect of their life is like, whether it be us or other people, or we simply can't remember it. So tip number 1, that is, I want you to repeat, like I said, all beings suffer. Say it on repeat when you find yourself comparing yourself to other people, as well as reminding yourself, right, that our brain is trying to keep ourselves alive. And so if we are noticing ourselves comparing, telling ourselves, hey, all beings suffer, and my brain is wanting me to look like this person because it thinks it's required for survival. But as the 21st century, my happiness is not conditional on a body size. I know that I am safe and I'm okay in my own body, right? Something along those lines. Make it your own. Tip number 2 is to curate your social media. So much of that feeling and desire to fit in, how our brain works, is because it wants you to fit into the environment you're in. If you're creating a social media environment for yourself or you don't feel safe to be yourself, that is problematic, right? If I'm only seeing photos of women and videos and everything of people whose body types don't look like me and they're causing me to feel shame, this feeling of inadequacy, that is sending off that more primitive part of your brain, telling yourself, oh my God, we don't fit into our environment. We don't fit into our tribe. What does that mean? Are we going to get kicked out, right? Shaming, judging, beating ourselves up. So create a social media environment for yourself where you feel safe to be yourself. So for example, if you're someone who is struggling with cellulite, you hate your cellulite on your legs, for example, something I used to hate about myself, I want you to be following lots of content creators on social media who have lots of cellulite to normalize it, right? For our brain, what it sees more often, what it has more evidence of, it will feel more safe to be, right? But if it never sees any cellulite, saying there's, whether it be they are airbrushed or there's a certain body type does not have it, even though majority of women do have cellulite, right? For ourselves, we think to ourselves, oh, I have cellulite, they don't, what is wrong with me? We start to spiral. So create a social media environment for yourself where you feel safe to be yourself by having lots of people on your pages who have a part of your body type that you are struggling with, but maybe exaggerated. So if you have lots of acne, maybe follow someone who has more acne. If you are someone who has stretch marks on your stomach, follow someone who has more stretch marks on their stomach, right? Really normalize it so you can feel safe in your own body. And my last tip number 3 here, is to really call out your brain, right? Ask yourself, why do I think I'd be happier? My life would be better if I looked like that person, right? What is that actually real concrete evidence that supports the idea that my life would improve if my body were different in that way? Or am I simply romanticizing their life based off of their body and their looks alone, right? That is what I have for you. And if you are someone who is struggling with bulimia or binge eating or orthorexia or emotional eating or stress eating or body image, or you want to have a better relationship with movement and exercise, all of those things, I really encourage you to book a consult call using the link below in the first comment, also into the show notes there. I would love to help support you in achieving that freedom with food and your body and your life using my unique science-based approach. So if you like my tools, if you like these videos, then you're going to love my coaching work. Because like I said, we're just really only digging into a little bit of it here, and we go so much deeper. And I'd absolutely love to hop on a call with you and see how I can best support you. So link below to do that. Thank you so much again for watching. Please hit the subscribe button. I'm dropping videos every single week, and I would love to have you here in my little community as I continue on and supporting you. Oh, I also wanted to make a little appearance at you. Oh, thank you. And you just wanted to say thank you so much for watching too. All right, thanks guys. Until next week, hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Bye-bye.